Alright, let's begin a new PowerPoint. This is a STAAR PowerPoint. Not sure exactly where we got it, but it is something that we have been using for a year or so, and it's a very good PowerPoint. It goes into pretty much all the material that you will need to know, and it does add some graphics, some pictures, some maps, some charts, some other things, hopefully help you better understand it. While we are waiting on that, let me try this. Yeah, it looks better. I've been experimenting with the size of the lines and some other stuff. It's kind of dumb, but it's what I do. Anyway, let's move forward into our first slide. We only have about 8 or 9 slides on this particular PowerPoint, so let's get started with it, and we're going to take a look at the causes, once again, of World War I. Now, we've gone over these in the vocabulary terms, but we're going to do it again because it is my belief that the more you are exposed to this material, the more likely you are to learn it. So, when the war in Europe started in 1914, of course, we did not become involved until 1917, but the war started in 1914. And there were 4 major causes of the war. Now, the death of the Archduke Franz Ferdinand, the Lusitania being sunk, the Zimmermann telegram, those are all events which led to the war beginning, but those are not really the major causes. Those major causes are quite simple: nationalism, imperialism, militarism, and the alliance system. We're going to take a look at each one individually, a little bit more depth and detail, so that way hopefully you'll fully understand. Again, here are the long-term causes spelled out here. Nationalism spurred competition among European nations. Because of that belief that my nation is better than yours, this created this feeling of competition between the nations. Imperialism. National rivalries were deepened because each country was trying to obtain new territory. Militarism leads to large standing armies, and again, oftentimes people build armies because they intend to use them. And then, of course, the alliance system, Europe was divided into these 2 rival camps. Let's move on to the first of the major causes, which would be nationalism. This is the first. That is horrible. Okay, let me redo that one. That is horrible. That's not a whole lot better, is it? The first of the causes. Let me get rid of that. Okay, the first of the causes is nationalism. A strong devotion, here's a definition, to the interest in culture of one's own nation, often to the exclusion of other nations. Now, this part right here, the exclusion of other nations, is the significant word there. We are so engulfed with our own interest, our own culture, that we exclude other nations. This belief in nationalism led to the idea that a single nation's interests are more important than cooperation among other states. Cooperation with other states. So, there's nothing wrong with being nationalistic, nothing wrong with having pride, having a strong devotion. There's nothing wrong with that. Can't see that. I guess when I do that. Okay, let's stick with this one. Nothing wrong with having a strong devotion to the interest and culture of one's own nation. Nothing wrong with that. America is, in my opinion, the greatest nation ever on this earth. However, when that belief in nationalism leads to the exclusion of other nations, when it is believed that my own nation's interests are more important than cooperating with other nations, when it becomes perverted like that, you got problems. Several ethnic groups within other nations wanted to form their own countries. So within a country, you may have some different nationalities who felt, again, that their culture, their own interests, was superior to everyone else's, and so they started to look to exclude other nations. Nationalism led to fighting among other nations. Now, I realize this is not the easiest map in the world to see down here. But what you have is a little bit of a look at some of the different ethnic groups within the Balkans. That area right in here, and colored in right there, you can see some of the different nationalities. I realize it was a little bit difficult to see them, but Albanian, Croatian, Hungarian, Macedonian, on and on and on. There's even a small group of Muslims right in there. And so the belief that your own ethnic group, or your own nation, if you want to take it to a larger step, was superior to everybody else's, and that the others did not deserve to survive, is what really nationalism is all about. And that's our first cause. Let's take a look at our second cause of World War I. That, of course, would be imperialism. Controlling a weaker nation. Of course, this is the key phrase right there, controlling a weaker nation as a source of raw materials and a market for your products. Now, we discussed we discussed imperialism numerous times. The United States, are a product of an empire, the British Empire, and the British came to what was then referred to as the New World, what is now the Americas, North and South America, as a result of looking for raw materials and eventually a market for their own products. They would take raw materials from America, the U.S. colonies. Let's just use timber as an example. We would send that raw material, timber, to England. It would then be sent to a mill where it would then be converted into a finished good, a chair, and then that chair would be sent back to the colonies to be sold. So we, the colonies, again just using our own example, things that we've studied, would be a source of raw materials and then a source, a market for their products. Many European nations controlled other nations of Africa and Southeast Asia, and there's a little bit of a map down here depicting that. So, as European powers, and it's a little bit difficult to see because of the dossier right there, okay, and a little bit difficult to read the entire legend, but you're looking at a couple of things. That kind of yellow right there was Belgium, right in there. The green was British. The little purplish area up here was French. The red areas over here, which is a little bit difficult to see because I'm using the red color, but anyway, you can see the idea right there. That was German, and then of course we had some Italian right there, and Portuguese over here, even a little bit of Spanish. So a huge chunk of Africa was controlled by European nations. And it was becoming more and more difficult to find and keep these colonial empires because a lot of the land had already been taken, had already been claimed, had already been colonized by other European powers. And they weren't going to allow you to take it away from them, at least without a fight. So this creates a lot of anger, a lot of animosity, a desire to go out and find new territories to control. Why? We're looking for raw materials and markets for our goods. As nations try to increase their economic power, around the world, as nations attempted to create more territories for their empire, this would lead to conflicts around the world, which of course would lead to World War I. Alright, let's take a look at our third cause, which is militarism. A little picture down here. Your country needs you. And there's a picture of a couple of soldiers. Militarism is the buildup of the military. pretty simple. And most countries have a military at this time. But what we're seeing in the late 1800s, starting about 1890, maybe a few years earlier, up until the beginning of the war in 1914, we are seeing extravagant, exorbitant amount of monies being spent upon the military. New weapons, such as the submarine, such as the machine gun. And of course, once the war begins, we see a lot of money spent on airplanes because they became quite useful. Anyway, we see huge amounts of money, what would be billions and billions of dollars in today's money. Excuse me, I'll be right back. My phone's ringing. All right, sorry about that. That was my sister-in-law calling about my wife flying out to see her. Yeah, you don't really care, so I'll just stop at that point. Let's get back to militarism. So I think I've done all that. Let's get to our second bullet here under militarism. Europeans were used to seeing people in uniform, even if you were not in the military. It's kind of weird, but Europe is a strange place. That's why we left it and came over here. Anyway, third bullet, it became a status symbol to wear your military gear as military discipline, and war became more admired. Again, we're looking at the late 1800s. There have been a series of conflicts in and out of Europe, in and around Europe, or in and around territory that European countries controlled, and it became quite a status symbol, as it says here. People started looking upon the military uniform as, oh my God, you're in the military, that's so cool. And we go back to this picture over here of these two puppies who, I mean, you know, God, look at all of that uniform. I mean, that's a heck of a uniform. They got gold and braid and who knows what all else. So that's probably that's cool. They're probably privates. I don't really know, but I mean that is a lot of stuff to wear. And it became quite fashionable to dress like that in public. Military leaders, to get back to our final bullet, felt it was better to attack first, and again, rather than wait to be attacked. Now, this is not something America has done. Now, during the years after 9/11, we did come up with the Bush Doctrine. President George W. Bush came up with the doctrine of if we are sure that a nation means us harm, and they have developed the means of harming us, then it is prudent to attack and take out those means of harming us before they use them, if that makes sense. And I'll give you an example of how the Bush Doctrine could be used today. It is a well-known fact that the country of Iran is attempting to create nuclear weapons. Everybody pretty much agrees that they are going to do so. The question is whether it be in a few months or in a few years. That's irrelevant. But we are relatively sure they are developing them, and they have come out and said numerous times, the president of their country, the military, the religious leaders, the mullahs, which Iran is a theocracy. It is run by the church, by the Islamic faith. The religious leaders, the mullahs, have come out and said, when we get these bombs, we're going to use them on Jerusalem, which is in Israel, and of course in the United States. So under the Bush Doctrine, it would be okay for us to attack them and destroy that ability to use those weapons before they are fully developed. Now, that's the Bush Doctrine, which was started in around 2003, 2004. Going back to this attack first stuff, we had never been a country to attack first. Let me clear this up a little bit so we can go back and see this bullet again really clearly. We had always been one to wait until something happens, to try to negotiate, to use the two oceans as a defensive line, to use our military, the threat of our military from preventing people from attacking us. But what we're seeing is military leaders in Europe feeling it is better to attack first rather than wait to be attacked because they felt that they were going to be attacked. Again, why should they attack first? Well, because it takes time to get everything going, to get your troops mobilized. When we first moved into Afghanistan, back in 2003, it took about a year, 9 months to 12 months to get our troops ready, to get the troops in position, to get all the supplies in position before we actually could do so. And we were at that time and still are the greatest military the world has ever seen. Yet it took us a long time to mobilize our troops. So what did the Europeans think was the thing to do? Well, attack first. Alright, let's go to our final cause of World War I, the alliance system. And I can't really do a whole lot better than what the explanation I gave you when we were looking at the vocabulary terms of the alliance system and how it worked out. But the alliance system were agreements between nations to aid one another in case they were attacked. We had essentially two divided camps in Europe in the 1890s through the early 1900s. You had the Central Powers, who were the bad guys, the enemy. That would be right in here, the kind of orangish color. The German Empire, the Austrian Empire, and the Ottoman Empire, essentially sometimes referred to as Turkey. And then you had the Allied powers, who were our good guys. And they, let me switch colors here just because it's fun to do. The Allied powers would be those in green here. Italy, and there's Portugal right there, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so those were the two main divisions, the Central Powers, who were the enemies, the Allied powers, who became our friends. One alliance had, again, Germany, Austria-Hungary, and the Ottoman Empire. There should be a comma right in there to show that there is a break between Germany. It's not Germany, Austria-Hungary. It's Germany, comma, Austria-Hungary, and the Ottoman Empire. And the other alliance, of course, were our two oldest friends, the Brits and the French, and then, of course, a new buddy, because they were fighting the Central Powers, the Russians. And here's a little bit of an illustration down here of that, where you have Serbia and the English and the Russians and the French, all kind of, got your back, I'm gonna protect you, blah, blah, blah. All right. Let's move on to the next slide. Got 3 or 4 more, I believe, before we finish with this presentation. The beginnings of the war. In 1914, the country of Austria-Hungary used imperialism to control several smaller nations, and we've talked about this already, located in the Balkans region. And the Balkans region is this area over in here, okay, right over there. The Balkans region is outlined there in red, and I circled it for you. One of those countries was Serbia. Serbia was controlled by Austria-Hungary. And here is the Austrian Empire right in there. And Serbia, I know it's a little bit difficult to see on this particular map, but Serbia is located right there. There's Serbia. And of course you can see where Austria is right there. And so Austria-Hungary was an empire. It controlled many of the Balkan nations, and of course the Balkans are right there in red. Let me get all these lines out of the way so it's a little bit easier to see. Okay. So this area in red, those are the Balkan nations. They were controlled by other European powers, and in particular the Austrians. One of the countries that was controlled was Serbia, and as you can well imagine, they didn't like it at all. And this map shows the European theater prior to the war. So you have the green, which would be right in here. Those are the Central Powers. This purplish color, those are the Allied powers. The Balkans, right in there. And of course there is Serbia. Right there, there's Serbia. All right, let's move on to our next slide. The match that lit the fuse. Now again, you could use any term you want to, any phrase you wanna, but this is the one that this particular PowerPoint used. So the powder keg is the Europe at this time, because of those 4 causes: nationalism, imperialism, militarism and the alliance system, it was just a powder keg waiting to be exploded. It was just waiting for that spark. It was just that firecracker waiting for the fuse to be lit. I mean, again, whatever metaphor you wish to use. And so that powder keg exploded in 1914 in the event that was the spark, the match that lit the fuse was the assassination of the Archduke Franz Ferdinand, who was one of the a member of the monarchy of Austria-Hungary. He was a member of the royal family, and he and his wife Sophia, and they can be seen here a little bit on the map. He and his wife and several others were oh, sorry, just my phone making noise. Let me turn that little puppy off, the ringer off, I'm sorry. Anyway, let's move forward. As I was saying, the Archduke and his wife and others were touring some of the countries that Austria had imperialistic control over, several of the nations that they exercised imperialism over. One of them was Serbia, okay, which was a country controlled by the Archduke. He ran into the street and shot and killed the Archduke and his wife. The man's name who shot and killed him was Princip, who was a member of the Black Hand. There you go. The Black Hand was a secret organization within Serbia that did not like being controlled by the Austrians, and they developed a plot to kill the Archduke, which they felt would send a clear message to Austria: stay out. And of course it didn't. It's a dumb plan. Now this picture right here is something I took directly from, this is part of the STAAR PowerPoint, and you can see there, take that, you imperialist swine, or whatever words you want to put there. So this is Princip right here, shooting and killing the Archduke and his wife, and that should be them right there. And that was the match that lit the fuse, which exploded the powder keg, which became World War I. Now, the alliance system takes down Europe is the title of our next slide here. The assassination of the leader, one of its leaders, one of the members of the royal family of Austria-Hungary, declared war on Little Serbia. Now, why? Again, Austria controlled Serbia to some extent, but they wanted more control. And they felt that this was a way that they could then send troops into Serbia and seize control of it completely. Now, this goes back for a number of years. There was a small war between the Austrians and Serbia about 25, 30 years earlier, referred to as the Pig War. Simply put, Austria imported a lot of meat, a lot of pork, a lot of beef from Serbia, and Serbia found a better buyer and sold it to the other buyer, not Austria, which created some discomfort, a little bit of a lack of food. There was minor skirmishes, which Serbia held their own. Kind of made Austria look, they kind of got embarrassed by it. And so there were still a lot of people in Austria who blamed some of their woes on Serbia and the Pig War. Anyway, kind of dumb, but sometimes these memories last a long time. However, Serbia had made an alliance with Russia. We get to our alliance system. So Austria declares war on Serbia. Serbia has an alliance with Russia. So when the Austrians attacked Serbia, the Russians came to the defense and declared war on Austria. Okay, so we have Serbia is at war with Austria. Russia declares war on Austria. Now, what happens next? Well, Germany had an alliance with Austrians, so they declare war on Russia. And since England and France had alliance with Russia, they now declare war on Germany and Austria as well. So, Austria attacks Serbia. Russia comes to the aid of Serbia. Germany goes to the aid of Austria. England and France go to the aid of Russia and Serbia. And so it went on and 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 on, until every nation essentially was forced to choose to go to war because of the alliances they had made. And here's our last slide of this presentation. World War I begins in Europe. It is 1914. Here's a picture of Woodrow Wilson. Elect me, and that will keep us out of Europe's affairs. Again, 1914, he's in the middle of his first term. He was first elected in 1912. Up to this point, he was primarily known as a progressive president. When 1916 rolls around, the war had been in place in Europe for a year and a half to 2 years. We were still neutral. Okay, we didn't get involved with the war that had started in 1914. So when the election of 1916 rolls around, Woodrow Wilson runs on the slogan, "I'll keep us out of war," or re-elect President Woodrow Wilson, "He kept us out of war." So the 1916 campaign, "I'll keep us out of war." He wins re-election, and he keeps his word to keep us out of war until April 1917, when a series of events caused us to join the war. And those events we've already discussed. Unrestricted submarine warfare, the Zimmerman telegram, on and on and on. And we'll take some of those up in the next presentation. So we're going to end this presentation, this first presentation of the STAAR PowerPoint right now. Bye.